Hello and welcome to Garden Priya channel. Roses in my garden are finishing their first flush, so I thought I would conclude this rose series by showing some climbing roses, or perhaps roses that behave like climbers that tolerate a partial shade in my garden. I garden in Zone 8A. I have selected roses from different breeders, and as we go along, I also want to gently question what we really mean by the term climbing rose. But at the outset, it is important to know climbing roses do not truly climb like ivy. They produce long canes that you need to train by tying them to supports. When these canes are trained horizontally, they produce side branches as shown that carry most of the blooms. So climbers generally need to have long flexible canes, vigorous vertical growth, and side branches, which are also called as lateral side shoots. Most climbers have vigorous vertical growth. But interestingly, not every rose with vigorous vertical growth is classified as a climber. I have, for example, Ivor's rose. It grows taller than my roof, and has long canes, blooms beautifully on side branches, but it is classified only as a shrub. So perhaps the boundary between shrubs and climbers is not always so clear. Let us now look at roses that have been classified as climber. The first rose we will see is Rosanna by Kordes. I call it a strong, formal-looking climber. This is a large flowered climber with salmon pink blooms that deepen along the petal edges. The flowers have at least 40 petals and only a light fragrance. The plant blooms in flushes throughout the year and is very disease resistant with glossy green foliage. However, the canes are fairly stiff and vigorous, so it takes some effort to train them horizontally. The next rose is called Peach Melba. I call this soft romantic climber. This is very healthy climber from Kordes with glossy green foliage. Its blooms show beautiful blends of apricot, peach, coral, and soft pink tones and delicately scented. The blooms can have up to 40 petals. The plant stays relatively compact. The next rose is Eden, also known as Pierre de Rousson. I call this iconic romantic climber, introduced by Meilland. The blooms are deeply cupped and very full, with creamy outer petals and soft pink centers that give the flowers an old world charm. The blooms are lightly fragrant and can contain up to 70 petals. The next rose is Rainy Blue. This is classified as a shrub but marketed as a climber. I call it a soft watercolor climber. This is a beautiful modern lavender climber with cool toned blooms and flexible canes that are easy to train. It was bred by Christian Everts. The blooms are small, lightly fragrant, and have up to 50 petals. It blooms in flushes throughout the year. The next rose is Marianne, a hybrid Gallica type rose bred by Paul Barden. It is a shrub but is classified as maybe grown as a climber. So I am growing it as a climber. I call this an old world arching rose. It produces spectacular spring flush of highly fragrant old rose style blooms along long arching canes. It is a once bloomer. The bloom colors vary from peachy creams to pinks to pale yellows with about 40 petals. Occasionally, I have also noticed some green proliferations in the blooms. The next rose is Rouge rose. I call it a cloud flowering climber. This is a modern Chinese climber bred by Jiang Zhengzhi. It produces masses of small cupped blooms in soft pink shades with the silvery highlights. This is its first year in my garden. The blooms are lightly fragrant with about 35 to 45 petals that appear in large clusters. The final rose we will see is Teasing Georgia by David Austin. I call this an elegant English climber. The blooms are deeply cupped with very full, rich golden yellow centers and soft outer petals, creating a beautiful two-toned effect. The flowers have lovely tea rose fragrance and can contain over 100 petals. It blooms in flushes throughout the season and can be grown either as a large shrub or trained as a medium climber. And perhaps roses like Teasing Georgia and Marianne remind us once again that the distinction between shrub roses and climbing roses is sometimes more fluid than we think. Thanks for watching.